The first time I saw the words 3 new credit accounts on my credit report, I thought it had to be a mistake. Then I saw the names attached to the purchases. My sister had spent nearly $18,000 in my name, and when I confronted my mother, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You weren't using your credit anyway." I felt something inside me go completely cold. My name is Claire Morgan. I was 32, worked as a project coordinator for a small construction company, and had spent years being the responsible daughter in my family. My younger sister, Megan, was 27. Megan had always been different from me. She was charming, impulsive, and somehow always managed to turn every problem into somebody else's responsibility. If she forgot to pay a bill, Mom handled it. If she lost a job, Dad helped. If she wanted a new phone, Mom found a way. I had learned early that asking for help came with a price. So I stopped asking. I built my credit carefully. I paid my bills on time. I saved money. I had one credit card with a low balance, and I rarely used more than a small part of the limit. My mother, Linda, often called that being overly careful. Megan called it being boring. I didn't care. Then one Tuesday morning, I received an email from my bank. There had been unusual activity connected to my credit profile. I opened my credit report during my lunch break. 3 new accounts. 3. A furniture financing account. A jewelry store card. And a retail credit line I'd never heard of. My hand started shaking. The furniture account had a balance of $7,400. The jewelry account was $5,900. The third account had almost $4,500 charged to it. Nearly $18,000. I called each company immediately. They all told me the same thing. The accounts had been opened using my personal information. I asked for copies of the applications. When the first one arrived, I recognized the phone number immediately. It belonged to my mother. I drove to my parents' house that evening. Mom opened the door with a smile. "Claire. What brings you here?" I held up the paperwork. "Who is Megan's new furniture for?" Her smile disappeared. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Mom sighed. "Oh, Claire. We were going to tell you." "We?" She looked away. Megan needed some things. Things? I placed the documents on the kitchen table. "You opened credit accounts in my name." Mom frowned. "Don't make it sound so dramatic." "Mom, that's identity theft." Her expression hardened. "You weren't using your credit anyway." I stared at her. She actually believed that made it okay. "I worked for that credit," I said quietly. "And Megan needed help. She could have asked me." Mom gave a short laugh. "She knew you'd say no." That sentence hurt more than anything else. Because she was right. I would have said no. And apparently, my family had decided that meant they could simply use me without asking. But that wasn't the worst part. I called Megan. She answered like nothing had happened. "Hey, Claire. Did you open credit accounts in my name?" Silence. Then she said, "Mom told me it was fine." "Did you use my information?" "Technically, Mom handled most of it." "Did you spend the money?" She hesitated. "Yes." "How much?" "Not that much." I almost laughed. $18,000 isn't that much? I'm going to pay it back. When? Eventually. I closed my eyes. That word, eventually, was the word my family used whenever they wanted me to accept a problem without asking when it would end. I told Megan I was disputing every account. She became angry. "You're going to ruin my credit." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It's my credit." Then she said something I'll never forget. "You're my sister. Why are you acting like a stranger?" I hung up. The next morning, I filed fraud reports with every lender. I also froze my credit. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to protect my family from the consequences of their choices. And that's when everything changed. 2 days later, my mother called me crying. "You've made Megan look like a criminal." "I didn't make her do anything. She could lose her apartment." I felt a strange sadness. Not for Megan. For the little girl I used to be, the one who thought her mother would always protect her too. "I can't fix this, Mom. You're her sister. And I'm your daughter." There was a long silence. Then Mom whispered, "How could you do this to us?" I almost dropped the phone. They had stolen my identity. Yet somehow, I was the one who had betrayed them. I hung up. I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. A week later, one of the lenders called. They had reviewed my fraud claim. The representative asked me a strange question. "Ms. Morgan, can you explain why your mother provided additional verification documents during the application?" My stomach dropped. "What documents?" She told me. "A copy of my driver's license. A copy of a utility bill. And something else. A signed authorization form. My signature. Except I had never signed it. Someone had forged my signature. I requested a copy. When I saw it, I recognized the handwriting immediately. It wasn't Megan's. It wasn't my mother's either. It belonged to my father. David Morgan. My father had always been quieter than Mom. He rarely argued. He usually sat at the dinner table and let Mom make the decisions. I drove straight to his workshop. He looked at the paperwork and went pale. "Claire. Did you sign this?" He didn't answer. "Dad." Finally, he sat down. I thought it was temporary. My heart sank. "You knew?" He rubbed his face. "Megan had debts." "How much?" He looked at the floor. "More than you know." That was the second twist. The $18,000 wasn't the beginning. It was the latest attempt to cover a much bigger problem. Megan had accumulated nearly $46,000 in personal debt. Credit cards. Missed payments. A car loan. Online shopping. My parents had been quietly paying some of it for years. But their savings were running out. So they decided to use my clean credit history. I stared at my father. "You didn't just let them do this." "I was trying to keep the family together." "You broke the family apart." His eyes filled with tears. "I know." For the first time, I saw my father not as the quiet parent who stayed out of arguments, but as someone who had made a terrible choice because he was afraid to say no. Still, I couldn't excuse it. I gave the lender everything I had. Police reports. Documents. Messages from Megan. Copies of the fraudulent forms. And then I did something my family never expected. I hired an attorney. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted my name back. Months passed. The fraudulent accounts were eventually removed from my credit report. But Megan was furious. She stopped speaking to me. Mom told relatives I had destroyed my sister's life. Some family members called me selfish. One aunt even said, "It's only money." I wanted to scream. It wasn't only money. It was my trust. My identity. My future. My name. Then, 6 months later, I received another letter. This one wasn't from a bank. It was from an attorney representing a creditor. The letter stated that my parents had used their home as collateral for a private loan connected to Megan's debts. And they were behind on payments. My mother called that night. "Claire, we need to talk." I already knew what she wanted. "I can't pay Megan's debts." "No," Mom said. "We're not asking you to." I waited. "We need you to refinance your mortgage." I laughed because I couldn't believe the words I'd just heard. "I don't own a house." You could buy one. Why? So you could help us. I felt a deep exhaustion settle over me. After everything, they still saw me as the solution to problems I hadn't created. No. Mom began crying. You're really going to let us lose everything? I answered quietly. You taught me that family means protecting the person who needs help. She sniffed. Yes. I finally learned that protecting someone doesn't mean destroying yourself for them. There was silence. Then I heard my father's voice in the background. Let her go, Linda. It was the first time my father had ever defended me. The foreclosure never happened. My parents sold their house and moved into a smaller place they could afford. Megan had to enter a debt repayment program. It wasn't glamorous. There was no dramatic courtroom scene. No magical inheritance. No sudden fortune. Just consequences. A year later, I received a letter from my father. It was only 1 page. He apologized. Not for getting caught. Not for the money. He apologized for teaching me that being the responsible daughter meant being responsible for everyone. I cried when I read it. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. But because, for the first time, someone in my family finally understood what I had been trying to say. I still speak to my father. I speak to my mother occasionally. Megan and I are not close. Maybe someday that will change. But I have one rule now. I will help people I love when I can. I will listen. I will forgive when forgiveness is earned. But I will never again confuse love with permission to be used. My family once told me I wasn't using my credit anyway. They were wrong. I was using it to build a life they had no right to take from me. And sometimes, the hardest form of love is saying no before someone else's choices destroy everything you've worked to build.